Hello, welcome back to Liberty Tactics on the TNS Radio Network, and we're joined with Walter Graham.
Hi Walter, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, you guys?
Yeah, we're
Not
good.
bad. Good to speak to you again.
We haven't spoken in a while.
I know. Got to catch.
Sorry.
It's all kicking off on the fluoride, as we predicted. I think last time that they were going to start more and more as more and more information gets out there about fluoride, that they were going to be a lot more ham-fisted in pushing it on us.
Yeah,
and,
it's certainly happening.
We've seen recently that they're giving the local councils the power to poison the
it's up to the
constituents?
councils now over here.
Yeah, but they've also passed 2 laws in England. One of them absolves whoever puts it in, the water company who puts it in, from lawsuits.
Right.
That's the first thing they've done. The other thing they've done is if they order the water service to fluoridate, they have no choice. It's mandatory. They put that in law, but then laws are just a bunch of words written by some guys who, don't have any responsibility to this.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, Walter, because quite a few of the groups are contacting me with, like, James, we need to set up a petition. We need to do petitions to stop this. And from the way I look at it, petitions aren't really particularly the most useful thing. So I was thinking, would a letter of intent be something that we could get people to start mailing into the local councils that basically say, look, if you can link all of the studies, a load of studies together, say, look, if you decide to vote on this, we will hold you legally responsible for the damages it causes personally, because usually these people are, there's no sort of liability towards anything that happens, But they've actually just passed that preemptively, I guess, to make sure that they weren't liable to poisoning people.
Yeah, but I still think it's worth sending in a letter. A petition, I don't think will have any effect personally. We did a petition here in Northern Ireland. I think we got 14,000 signatures in a couple of months. They just threw it in the bin.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. So I was thinking of a letter campaign, and I would like some help on this from our listeners as well. We've got a lot of really smarter people than I am. I wrote up a sort of draft outline, and it basically was a letter that would give a notice of intent that, here is the information, because I'm sure a lot of councillors have absolutely no idea. They'll get a little how fluoride is great pamphlet through, and maybe be bought some dinner and, some backhanders, and then they'll just vote this through. So I thought the best way would be, a nice formal letter that gives them the studies showing that the science behind it is at very least questionable. The health effects, maybe some titles of lawsuits, because I know in the States they've been losing lawsuits hand over fist. There's quite a few places that they've had to withdraw fluoride because they couldn't prove that it was harmless. Yeah. So I thought it would be a great way of saying, look, I know you're going to vote for this, but here's the information. Now you are on record of being aware of the dangers, and if this goes through, we're going to, move forward with some sort of criminal prosecution. Because I'm sort of sick of getting poisoned and there being no accountability. Like, oh, well, it's the council, as if the council is some sort of cloud in the sky and there's not actually anybody accountable for it. There are people accountable for it. If somebody puts cyanide in your drink, that isn't not poison because they're a diplomat or a councillor or anything. And we need to start actually getting these people to be aware that those choices that they vote on have consequences. Yeah. So you think that sort of thing is still something that is worthwhile to pursue?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's as cut and dried as they think it is, getting away with this. I'll tell you, for a start, it's happening all over the world. In the past 10 years, 250 cities across America have taken this out. In Canada, Calgary took it out about 6 months ago, and I think it's called Windsor, another large city in Canada, in Ontario. They just took it out. They've all stopped after 30 years of doing this. They've been confronted with the science. And it's getting clearer all the time. Queensland in Australia, they just took it out last month. They stopped. They voted to ban fluoride from their drinking water. That's after a bunch of their councillors were made aware of the side effects, and some of them must have done their homework. So I think it's worth sending in the letter, especially talking about side effects, because you may educate these guys.
Yeah.
A lot of them would be actually well-intentioned. There's probably some of them that have been paid off. I wouldn't be surprised, but there's certainly a lot of them are well-intentioned. They don't have a clue how stupid this is.
Well, yeah, that's why I would imagine that they get some sort of glossy flyer that shows people smiling, and then that is the extent of the information that they are given. And then it's like, well, there's people smiling on this thing, and I had a nice dinner. I'm going to vote for this. And, and they still like to paint that whole thing that if you question fluoride, it's Dr. Strangelove, the nutter in the military compound that's questioning fluoride, and then that's it. And it's really not that way, is it?
No, because, I mean, really what they're talking about here is cavities is a dietary problem. Mm-hmm. How does throwing in hundreds of millions of gallons of a toxic corrosive acid into all our drinking water every day going to cure a dietary problem? Of course it isn't. Mm-hmm. You know, the whole thing's crazy. If you're going to change the diet of the children, you should be doing it through education. Certainly not through dumping chemicals in the water system like this. And this is a one-size-fits-all. So little babies who actually by body weight drink 8 times more water than the adult in the house are going to get 8 times more of this chemical than an adult. So there's nothing about this that makes any sense. They're just doing this, and the counselors aren't being made aware. Just as you say, they're given a brochure that has a lot of stuff on it that isn't really true, or is half-truths, because I've seen some of their brochures. Like, they'll tell you that there's 250 million people worldwide who are drinking fluoride in like 50 countries, right? Well, you know, if you take away, which I've done, we did the arithmetic on this, we took away Canada, America, New Zealand, Australia, you know that we were left with just like 1 million? And we still had 48 countries. You know, the whole thing is just a pack of, it's a house of cards that's going to fall at some point. Nobody's questioning these people over what they say in their brochures or all the stuff they put out. And certainly it's a biased piece of stuff. You know, it's just propaganda that they put out. There's no facts in it.
Walter, how did you get involved with this? How did you get involved with this campaign against fluoride?
Well, it started off for me when they announced they were going to put it in the water system here, and they put in the paper that it had 0 side effects, no side effects at all. Now, I knew, I did pharmaceutical marketing at the time, and I knew that there was no such thing as a drug without side effects. They all have like maybe 10, 20 side effects, and yet here was one they were telling me, and it was a really toxic substance that had no side effects. Now, at that time, I didn't know they were putting in hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is even worse. They said we were putting in fluoride, but when I actually looked at it, of course, it made no sense, because you can't deliver drugs by thirst, which is what they're doing. The person who's the most thirsty gets the most drug. Well, I mean, you know, in the pharmaceutical world, you give drugs by body weight. In that a small baby gets a small amount of the drug, and a large 300-pound adult gets a large amount of the drug. Well, this obviously goes right out the window once you stick it in the water supply, so it didn't make sense to me. And the fact that they lied about the side effects, I knew something was wrong. And I started writing into them. They started lying, writing back all kinds of stupid stuff that wasn't chemically true. And that was what got me started. And then I went around to the councils on the same night as they went around. And this is amazing. They had a 45 minutes slideshow with music and all kinds of dissolving slides and stuff. I had nothing. I had a sign that said 98% of Europe have rejected this. And I just sat there, and I only got 10 minutes. And at the end of this, I wasn't the only one who went around. There were a lot of other people went around to other councils in the other parts of Northern Ireland. But I went around to a lot of councils in my area. And by the end of it, we had 25 out of 26 councils vote against this. And I thought that was probably the end of it, because they couldn't go over the head of the councils. But then they announced that they didn't care what the councils thought. They were going to do it anyway. And that really got me very active, because I said, no, there's no way they're going to override the councils. They asked their opinion. And then when they got the wrong answer, they weren't happy with it. So I started then organizing the councils. I brought them in, made a coalition of councils. And we started threatening to sue the government using their money.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And how did that go? What happened? What was the results?
The councillors were all sent threatening letters by the government saying that it was illegal to use public funds to sue a public body, and that they would be put in jail if they tried it. But all that did was get the councillors more and more upset, because they had been asked their opinion. They'd given it. Mm-hmm. And they were really only voicing the opinion of the public. They had done a survey here that found 86% of the people didn't want this at all. Mm-hmm. But this is a common story. If you look at Southampton, right now they're trying to fluoridate Southampton. They did a survey in Southampton, and turned out 76% or something like that of the population said no. They're getting it anyway. The government just mandated it. So there's no democracy in this. Obviously, if this was a democracy, they wouldn't be drugging everybody anyway, you know? Mm-hmm. And the only people you can drug in a democracy against their will are people in an insane asylum.
Yes.
And you wouldn't even want that. Okay, so this week I've had some run-ins with the pro-fluoride camp, which is usually... I don't like to use the left-right sort of thing, but they seem to be very liberal. Mm-hmm. They seem to go back to the whole fallacy that if you believe that there's anything wrong with fluoride, you're a conspiracy nut. Now, I posted dozens and dozens of studies, the links to thyroid disease, and, oh, God, just ridiculous amounts, to sort of say, look, and they still seem to think it was acceptable. Now, to me, the water should be water, and that should be it, really. I mean, I don't even think chlorine should be in there, but if there is, you should be able to filter it. But fluoride is something else. Fluoride is direct medication of drinking supply, and there is no opting out. It's not like you can say, well, I choose to opt out of having fluoride. Yeah. Also, as far as I'm aware, there's no way of being able to say that you're going to get the 1 parts per million that is the recommended dose in your house, and somebody up the street isn't going to get 5 parts per million because of the way that they just basically dump these buckets of, poison. Poison into the water. So could you please, for the people that may not be aware of just exactly how dangerous this sort of practice is, would you be able to go into, one, where fluoride comes from? Because there are still people out there that think that sodium fluoride and hydrofluoric acid is the same as the mineral fluorine compound. They just presume it's the exact same thing, which it's not. Could you go into that and exactly how it's added to the water and the inconsistencies of getting that? And also, because it relates to it, because they always say that there's an acceptable level of harm. Yeah. You're not just getting fluoride from your drinking water, you're getting fluoride from your salt, your tea, and everything else. So could you go into just, that so that people are made aware of just exactly how bloody diabolical this is?
Yeah, I'll start off. I'll tell you what I'm looking at right now is a textbook on chemistry. It's by a Dr. Rohom, and it's the comparison of toxicity of inorganic fluorides. And it says under moderately toxic, that's moderately poisonous, is sodium fluoride, right? Or calcium fluoride, calcium fluoride. That's what's naturally occurring in some water supplies in very, very small amounts, probably thousands of times less than what they're adding. Then in very toxic is sodium fluoride. That's what's in your toothpaste. Then in extremely toxic is hydrofluorosilicic acid. Now, we took this chart to Queen's University, and we got some chemistry students there to work out the toxicity of the different things by the chart. And it turns out that the hydrofluorosilicic acid that they're using for water treatment is 2,400 times more poisonous than is calcium fluoride, which is naturally occurring. And the other problem with it is because what they're really dumping in isn't fluoride anyway. That's the big lie that they're telling the public, that they're putting in fluoride. No, they're not. They're putting in a chemical compound, a whole bunch of chemicals all added together. It's the toxic waste of the phosphate fertilizer, aluminium, and nuclear energy industry. That's where they get this crap from. And it's usually shipped in from other countries who banned it. Like in the Republic of Ireland, they were getting theirs from Holland. And Holland actually rewrote its constitution never to have this again. And yet they still have a toxic dumping problem in their industry. So what do? They ship it to Ireland and they eat it. So the problem is they're not putting in fluoride. They're putting in this toxic waste of the industry, which has all kinds of contaminants. We took the acid from a water treatment plant in the south and had it analyzed in a lab in Dublin. And we found that it had uranium, It had strontium-90 in it. This is radioactive particles. It had lead, arsenic. It had mercury. It had cadmium, chromium. It had aluminium that causes Alzheimer's. This thing was laced with all kinds of toxic chemicals, and yeah, it had some fluoride in it. But it's not fluoride they're adding. That's the joke of what they're doing. They're just lying to the public about this. But there you go. So where they get it from, that's where they get it from. It's from the phosphate, mostly from the phosphate fertilizer and aluminium industry, but some from the nuclear industry as well. And that's why it has all these contaminants, because it's not a pure product. It's just a toxic waste. So what they do is they have these scrubbers in the chimneys of the industry, like the phosphate fertilizer industry, and they're forced by international law. They're not allowed to release the fluoride into the atmosphere, because if it lands on the fields around, it'll kill the animals. So what they do is they have scrubbers in the chimney, and they capture all the contaminants. And then at the end of the night, they wash it out with sulfuric acid, and it makes a slurry called hydrofluorosilicic acid. And it's got all these contaminants in it. And they don't treat it with anything. They don't try and get the contaminants out. They just ship it straight to your water department, and they stick it in. And when you look at how many people actually drink the water, mostly cattle are drinking it. Cattle, sheep, horses, pigs, chickens. And besides, they lose 40% in underground leaks before you even get it. If you ask your water department, 40% is lost before you even get it. That's 40% of all your tax money gone out in the environment. And out of the 60% that's left, industry and farming use 7/8 of the entire water supply. So that's 7/8 of the 60% gone to industry and farming. So it's very little that actually makes it to human beings. Yeah. And then how many children in the whole population have the tooth problem? It's about 3% of the population. So you've got 3% of the population drinking 3% of 1% of 1/8 of all the water that you bother to fluoridate. It's absolutely ludicrous. But it's
basically their emotive sales pitch, which is to help the poor little children in the inner city. Oh no, they've got some cavities. We've got to do this. It is redundant, because next to none of that water is actually getting to the end user, anyways. No. And it is basically just a way for them to get rid of or actually sell a toxic waste product instead of having to get rid of it any other way.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, there's a book that just came out in 2007 by a guy called Christopher Bryson. Bill Bryson's the other guy that writes the comedy books. Christopher Bryson, he's a BBC health correspondent, and he was asked to do a piece on fluoride, and he ended up writing a book called The Fluoride Deception, and I would tell everybody to go out and get it. In the book, he tells you that there are massive side effects, including cancer, irritable bowel syndrome, thyroid dysfunction, skin rashes, to migraine headaches, you name it, this stuff can do it, because it's a very toxic substance. So he tells you of all the side effects and all of the studies that have been buried by the government that they're not acknowledging. There's thousands of studies proving that this stuff causes cancer and harm. The government's saying there's no side effects at all. Mm-hmm. Now, what I've been doing is I've been taking Chris Bryson's book and all these other books with me. I have a whole bunch of chemistry books here on fluoride side effects, all totally with documented references. And then when I go to see any politician, I bring all the books and I stack them on his desk. And I take him through each of the books and I say, now, all of these chemists, all of these doctors from around the world have printed these books. None of them have been sued, including Chris Bryson, who's a BBC correspondent. One of them's lying. Either the government's lying or all of these doctors who've written these books are lying. There's no other choice here. Mm-hmm. And that snaps them around pretty quick, because when you start looking at the side effects we're talking about, including lowered IQs in children, there's been now 33 studies, and one just came out a couple of months ago from Harvard Medical School. Mm-hmm. It's the 33rd study that found that fluoride causes neurological damage in children. Now, the 33rd study, how many do we need? 50? When do we call a stop?
Did you see the addition that they made to that study afterwards, after it got out, and there was a big stink about it, that Harvard came out and said, well, that's China, and American fluoride is completely different. It affects Americans completely different, and they didn't actually explain why. It was just that, no, if you put fluoride If you dump that into water in China, they get, on average 20 IQ points lower. But if you do it in the States, magically, it's harmless. And they literally do just... there is no real... I don't know. I've been talking about this for years. And
we had Fluoride on, didn't we, last week from Osmio about the various filters and everything else
to get rid of it.
To get rid of it. And are filters able to get... I mean, you listed all those other chemicals when you were just saying it wasn't just fluoride. Water... Is there a list of where we can get those other chemicals that are going in to it? Where can people go and source those, source that information from? And with regards to the water filtration, all the other chemicals, a lot of the Murad gets out the filters. Murad was talking about the chloramine. Was it chloramine he was talking about last week? And that. But these other chemicals, can filtering the water take all of these out, Walter?
Very hard. It's very expensive. There is a filter, but it costs a fortune. It has to be replaced continuously, so it's very expensive. The cheapest way of doing it is a distillation unit. You can go online, put in China, distillation unit, or put in distillation unit China, and you'll come up with websites where you can buy a distillation unit, which is really just like a glorified kettle, but it has a stainless steel coil at the top. And as it heats the water, it turns to steam, and as it goes through the stainless steel coil, there's a little fan that blows cold air over it, and it condenses it back into pure water. And all of the contaminants, including fluoride, end up in the container, inside the container. And the water that drips out is pure drinking water. And it only costs less than €100 for a distillation unit, maybe 80 pounds, something like that. Mm-hmm. It's the cheapest answer, and it'll run for 8-9 years. Now, it costs you in electricity, but nothing like what the filters and all the other things that you'd have to get cost.
And the silly thing is that basically you can filter to some extent the fluoride. If you spend a lot of money, you can filter 95%. It's one of the smallest contaminants, so filtration is very difficult.
Yep.
It doesn't need to be filtered because they shouldn't be adding it in the first place.
Of course they shouldn't, but are.
That is the problem. But I think the solution isn't finding ways to filter it. It's like saying we need to figure out how to bandage stab wounds instead of finding the nut job that is stabbing people. We know fluoride is dangerous. We've got the tools, and I think people are waking up to it. But as we said, the system is just... I guess it's going to cost them billions to actually dump this toxic waste properly, so they're going to spend a lot of money trying to push it on local councils now.
Well, that's what Chris Bryson's book says. This is just legalized dumping. They're helping industry. And if you look at 99.9% of the water is wasted, right? So 99.9% of all the money is wasted. Now, who are they helping? The 3% of the population who have this tooth problem and don't brush their teeth, or the 99.9% that's the chemical industry who's getting rid of this stuff? Who are they logically helping here? Obviously, the chemical industry. It's certainly not the kids, And do we really care about kids? We're closing hospitals all over the place. We're cutting doctors' salaries back. I mean, we don't give a damn about health.
Do you have any information on how much... Ireland or the UK, England would spend on a fluoridation program? It's not cheap, despite the fact that we're actually taking on chemical waste.
Yeah,
they actually sell it, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you in the Republic of Ireland right now, they estimate that it's something like $7.5 million that they're spending on this stuff every year. But that's not the full cost. Because there's the installation of this equipment. First you have to buy it in this very high-spec equipment. It's going to cost a fortune to get the equipment that puts this stuff in. Then everybody who touches it has to have insurance. They've got to wear spacesuits when they go anywhere near this stuff. They have to build reinforced concrete walls around the tanks that hold it, because if it ever comes loose, it'll eat its way through everything. The only thing that fluoride can eat its way through, it can eat through stainless steel, fiberglass, concrete. The only thing it can't eat through is epoxy plastics, so they have to make the tanks that hold it are in epoxy plastic. But if there's ever a leak, it'll eat through everything. There'll be no stopping it. And anybody who's in the room or even breathes it is going to have serious trouble and possibly die. They know this. It's quite incredible what they're doing. They're putting this in, and the side effects are so far-reaching that even if, I don't even have to be a doctor to know that if any one of these side effects is true, we're in serious trouble here. And just as you're saying, we shouldn't be talking about getting distillation units or filters or anything because 90% of the population can't afford this. So we're going to have 90% all get poisoned? Obviously the answer is stop these guys now before they get it in and get active in your community and start telling people there's a problem here. I think writing the legal letter in is a good idea because it puts them on notice. And there is a chance at some point that somebody will decide to sue. And then there'll be massive litigation,
Yeah, because, as Murad says, it's like the whole thing with smoking or with the asbestos. You had all these bodies in place to protect the consumer, and they were saying for years that asbestos was completely harmless.
Yeah.
We knew it wasn't. We knew that they were lying. There's this perception that there's some sort of regulatory body. There often is regulatory bodies that are there to protect us, and that's not the case.
No.
And we have to start taking this into our own hands and saying, no, just because there may be an acceptable level of harm just means that, they gave it to someone, they didn't die straight away, so then it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, come on. We're supposed to be civilized here. So just because there are these bodies there doesn't mean that we should just give up our responsibility to research and to find out that a poison is a poison, and that if they are even thinking about this, we have to take proactive action, because once it's in there, it's a lot more difficult to get rid of than them just saying, well, this is at the very least there's a level of doubt whether or not it's harmless, and there is, because there's so many studies. You just look at the source of the where the fluoride comes from. There's so much information out there that you can't say it's harmless.
No.
Even if you are living in the clouds and you want to pretend that everything is hunky dory, you still got to say, well, there's enough evidence there now to say we probably shouldn't be force medicating the entire country.
But is it not? Am I wrong in thinking they're also putting lithium in the water?
They're looking at it.
Ireland?
They're looking at it. In the Republic of Ireland right now, it's before the Dáil. They're considering doing this, but the only reason they're considering it is because they already have the equipment in place to drug them with fluoride. So now they don't have to pay anything extra. They can just dream up any kind of cocktails of chemicals for any stupid reason. It could be teenage pregnancies, and on Tuesday they'll put in contraceptives. That's how stupid this is.
I mean, how would they sell lithium to the people? They've sold the fluoride for the health benefits.
Well, because they say it lowers depression and suicide.
But they don't have to sell it. You see, in the Republic of Ireland right now, it's mandated. They're forcing this stuff on them. So they won't bother asking whether they want it. They're just going to get it if they choose to do it. That's how crazy this is. But there is one side effect that the government does admit to, and you can even look it up on your computers, anybody who's at home. It's called dental fluorosis. And it's spelled the same as fluoride because the only substance on Earth that can do this damage is fluoride. It's dental fluorosis. And it causes white stains or white spots, which are actually dissolved holes through the enamel of the teeth. And they appear horizontally across the teeth. And then they turn brown and they become stains. But they're an indication that you've been poisoned by fluoride and that your skeleton is already poisoned by fluoride as well, because the teeth are the only visible part of your skeleton. Now, in England, or in the Republic of Ireland, where they've been fluoridating for 45 years, the government down there admits that 50% of the entire population now have dental fluorosis. So you're telling me we're trying to prevent 3% from getting a few cavities, and instead we gave 50% of the entire population a new oral disease that never existed before, that has bone implications and cancer attached to it.
Well, obviously, because fluoride, this is what irritates the piss out of me, is that they think that fluoride is a medication that will only go to the teeth. And this is people that are apparently, they've gone to university. Look, when something goes into your body and it affects your teeth, even if it did prevent cavities in your teeth, that stuff is going to every single other part of your body. Yeah. It's going to affect your bones, and you can speak to the damage that fluoride does to bones in general. There's a massive increase in bone cancer.
There is, yeah.
There's bone brittleness. There's the obviously if it creates fluorosis in your teeth, that is affecting every single bone in your body, and this is so well documented. And there just is absolutely there's this reality distortion field around some of these people that they just seem to think that magically through fairy pixie dust that this doesn't affect other parts of the body. That the fluorosis is only a cosmetic thing in your teeth, and that your other bones.
When was it like this discovery of fluoride actually found?
Well, the actual discovery of fluoride, they had trouble isolating it, but it was done in the late 1800s. But in early 1900s, they actually started to isolate the fluorine gas. They found a way of breaking the rock down and isolating it. Up until then, they knew it existed, but they couldn't isolate it because the stuff is so reactive that it bonds instantly. I mean, absolutely instantly with something else. It will not stay it cannot be controlled. That's the problem with it chemically. And the chemical industry love the stuff. That's why they're protecting it so heavily, because fluoride is like crazy glue. If you take 3 chemicals and you put them in a bucket together, they won't mix. They won't join together. If you put fluoride in, they'll become a new chemical instantly. And because fluoride will glue them all together and make them 50 times more toxic than they were before. For example, Valium is a relatively innocuous drug, right? You put in 3 fluorine ions and it becomes a Rohypnol, a date rape drug. 50 times more powerful. That's how this stuff. That's why the chemical industry is worried about this. They're trying to protect this at all costs because it is so useful for them. It's a super glue. I had to give a talk to doctors in London a couple of years ago. I was invited over and on fluoride. And in order to point out to them, I took them through the logic from a doctor's point of view of this, And one of the things I was saying was about the 33 studies about neurological damage. I said, what do anesthetics, pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, which is rat poison, what do they all have in common? What does Rohypnol have in common? What does Prozac and what do all of these nerve gases like sarin, the nerve gas, all have in common? Believe it or not, the active ingredient in all of them is fluoride. Mm-hmm. And what do they all have in common? They all work on the central nervous system. And now this has been found with 33 studies to cause central nervous system damage. What a shock.
I was going to ask this because I've heard this, that fluoride is a sort of adjuvant in that it helps to not only, it's got its own effects by itself, but it pushes the contamination of the properties of other things, medications, and that. Yeah. If you have fluoride, if you're intaking fluoride in your water, for say, the effects of other medications that you're taking are far more powerful than just if you take it in. Is that correct, or am I just talking?
Well, no, that's correct. Fluoride, that's the problem. Once you put this in the water system, you see, here's the other problem you have, too. In your water treatment plants, say there's water coming down from a chemical industry or like a paint factory. They've been washing out their hoppers at night, or a pharmaceutical company, and they've been washing out from some drug, say birth pills or something, and all this stuff's going down into the water system. Now, they're pulling this water back out of your reservoirs again, and then they're adding fluoride to it, and it meets up with these other contaminants. What do you think is going to happen? Mm-hmm. It's doing the exact same in your body. When you bring in fluoride, whether you brush your teeth with it or you drink it like they're putting it in your water supply, it's going to mix with other things in your bloodstream, in your stomach. I mean, for example, there's people who are out there taking vaccinations. So they've got all these chemicals now in their system, but they maybe wouldn't react with each other, but then put fluoride in there. They'll soon make something happen.
And then you've got the aspartame as well, haven't you, that's going into everything. Yeah. All the aspartame, yeah. So there's all those chemicals.
It sort of hypercharges
then
all
they're having
of the
the
other
fluoride
chemicals.
as well.
It heightens every chemical. That's the problem with it. But that's what the chemical industry love it for, because they can take a harmless drug, suddenly add fluoride to it, and it becomes a super drug, like Rohypnol. So they're using it themselves, and they can't have it questioned. That's why they deny any side effects, because if they admitted to any side effect at all, there'd be lawsuits and they'd go out of business over this, and then it'd be taken out of every product. They can't have that. I mean, look at the toothpaste manufacturers, the amount of toothpaste they're selling, mouthwashes, dental floss. This stuff's in everything now, even chewing gum.
And they're using it in as a pesticide or a fertilizer now as well.
Well, it's in pesticides. It's in a lot of pesticides. It's always been in there. It's always been in herbicides and things like that. It's the active ingredient. It's what stimulates the whole thing to work, and it gives it, much more potency as a poison.
If you've got, I've heard tell, I think it was Australia, where once they started fluoridating the water, they were having entire herds of cows and cattle die because they were suddenly drinking, the tap water, and keeling over. Now, with this, when they take this toxic chemical, if anybody is in doubt, what you do is you Google or Start Page or something, you search, fluoride water treatment, and you see how they have to dump this stuff into the water supply. They're wearing all the hazmat stuff, and they've got all the lovely tankers that are reinforced so that it doesn't eat through, but it's completely great to drink,
Yeah.
When they dump that in, tell the listeners how that is scientifically blended in to get a one part per million to all of the water supplies through all the land, or is it actually quite unscientific and that people are getting massive doses of this?
Yeah, totally unscientific. The people closest to the dosing point are getting most of it.
Right.
So it dissipates as you're talking about 6,000 miles of pipe between where they put it in and the end user on the end of the pipes. Mm. And you think it stays suspended at 1 part per million over 6,000 miles of pipe? No. The people closest to the factory get most of it.
If talking locally now, we've got a water treatment plant in, I think, in Exeter, and there's one in Plymouth. If they started adding this to Plymouth water, even though that water supply may reach us in Brixham, there's going to be the people, in Plymouth, Plimpton, all those towns in between are going to get massively higher doses of fluoride than we are.
Oh yeah, and you see, it's not just in the water. Once you put it in the water, it's in all your food and drink. Mm-hmm. So you're getting fluoride from everything now. We took some products from a supermarket in Dublin and had them analyzed in the lab. Right, I didn't do it. A crowd in the south did it, a citizens group, and they found that there was one cheese that had 29 parts per million in it.
Wow.
They found, I think it was a cider that had 6 parts per million in it. They found something else that had 3 parts per million. They didn't find anything that had 1. Why? I mean, they put in 1. How come it's because, so this isn't everything now. Once they put it in the water system, it goes into every food and beverage. So you're not getting just your 1 part per million from your drink, even if you were ever getting that. Mm-hmm. You're getting 1 part per million from your boiled potatoes. You're getting 1 part per million from your pasta, from your rice. Everything that you make out of that water has got 1 part per million in it. So you're getting it from everywhere now. Plus, that doesn't even look at the cosmetics that you've got or the dental products you're eating, and using every night. It doesn't take into account pesticides that are sprayed on your foods. Mm-hmm. So this is quite an amount you're getting from this. Plus, coal burning turns out fluoride. You've got fluoride coming from unleaded petrol. Because you know how they take the lead out of petrol? They use fluoride. Fluoride bonds with the lead, and then they try and filter it out. The problem is it leaves trace elements of fluoride. So what comes out of the back end of the car is hydrogen fluoride, which is one of the most corrosive stuffs on Earth. And so they know that you're getting this from coal burning, from your petrol fumes, from all kinds of sources.
And of course, it's in the bath as well, isn't it? Because you're bathing in it and showering in it, unless you've got one of the water filters.
No.
But you're going to be bathing in it, and that's absorbing in. And I know Clive DeCarl always says, our health guy, Walter, he comes on, he says, whatever you wouldn't put in your mouth to eat, why would you put it on your body? Because it's doing exactly the same thing. It's absorbing into the skin.
Well, and they've done tests on a bath, a hot bath. If you take a hot bath, you absorb more fluoride in that hot bath than you do drinking the water through the whole week. Because your pores open up, and it's in large quantities in there.
And Sorry, Snurge just says, don't say vodka, please. I would hope that the vodka is distilled, so you should be all right there, mate.
Yeah.
But as far as, bathing and whatnot, I've lost my train. I started thinking about vodka, see?
Oh, no.
But, no, and it's in the tea, apparently. There's a natural amount, I hear, of fluoride in tea.
Well, I bought some local bottled water. I know I shouldn't be drinking the bottled water because we've got the BPA, but I was out, I got some local bottle mineral water, and on the back there was something like 2% fluoride in it. But would be that the natural? Because apparently I was, when I said, oh no, I don't want that, I was then told, oh no, well fluoride.
There is a natural amount, mineral. But it's the thing is, there's a lot of these big companies, the water companies that seem to be owned by the big conglomerates like Coca-Cola or Pepsi. They actually go out of their way to add it to it as well.
Well, the problem is a lot of these companies like Coca-Cola and so on, they're actually in fluoridated areas. So, say, for example, in England, you've got Newcastle. Newcastle is fluoridated, so Newcastle Ale, I assume, is fluoridated unless there's some way they're filtering it out. So you've got products that come from fluoridated areas. Birmingham, Newcastle, parts of the West Midlands. Along the coast, they've done small towns. So, you have to check the source of where your stuff is coming from. And, whenever you're saying about naturally occurring calcium fluoride, there is some in some water systems. A lot of water systems don't have any. But as I say, in the toxicity table, it's still moderately toxic. So it still causes damage, but it's at a lot less. And the amount that you get from naturally occurring is minuscule compared to what they're adding in. They're saying they're topping it up to this optimal level. Well, there's no proof that there is such a thing as an optimal level. They just made it up.
And have you noticed that they're starting to come out as more and more people become aware of this, as more and more places that were fluoridated remove it because the councillors or the water boards are realising that their asses are on the line because this is actually hurting people and that they may be held account for it, that they're removing it. You're starting getting news articles on the mainstream media and on TV, and they're saying, fluoride levels are dangerously low. Oh my God, people aren't getting the fluoride that they need, and they're fluoride deficient. Is there a fluoride deficiency problem? Is this something that humans that they're not getting 2 or 3 parts per million of fluoride a day, are they really suffering? Is that anything that's analytical, or is that just scaremongering by the mainstream media because the people that are paying their bills are needing to get rid of their toxic waste?
According to Chris Bryson, it's just scaremongering, and they're trying to get rid of the toxic waste. There is no proven need for fluoride in the human body. None. It does nothing.
What you see is, sorry, Lou, but what you see is you'll get people saying, oh well, there's fluoride in mother's milk. This is similar to the people that complain that there's mercury in the vaccinations. They say, oh well, there's mercury in tuna fish, as if naturally occurring levels of mercury in a fish that you eat through your gut, which then does not process it the same, is the exact same as is injecting mercury into your bloodstream.
I'd just like to jump in. Sorry, Murad's actually in the chat room.
Hi, Murad.
And he's saying, apparently over in Turkey, no one drinks the tap water. Everyone uses the bottles. And there is actually an association group set up to ensure all bottled water firms add fluoride.
Whoa.
And that's in Turkey.
Oh, my goodness. Well, boy, remind me not to go there on a holiday.
Scary.
Yeah, it's crazy. You see, when they get away with putting this in like this, then they start spreading that this is quite safe, and it's not safe. Fluoride is not safe in any form. I mean, if you look at the back of your toothpaste tube, it actually says, keep out of the reach of children. Make sure they don't swallow this product. Make sure, and watch them while they brush their teeth and make sure they spit it all out. And they should use no more than a pea-sized amount of the product. The American toothpaste tube goes further. It actually says, if you accidentally swallow the pea-sized amount, you should contact a poison control center immediately, and then it gives you a 1-800 number. They're putting poison warnings, toothpaste tubes in America, over very, very small amounts of this stuff, and not sodium fluoride.
And how much fluoride, from what I can recall, is it a pint of water is equivalent with the fluoride content as a pea-sized amount of toothpaste?
Well, yeah. What you've got is I had a chemist in England weigh out, and then I took a photograph of the amount of fluoride that's in a 1 part per million that they're talking about, and it was a pin dot, an absolute pin dot. It was so small that you had to have a photo lens to get at it. That's how much 1 part per million really turns into. In a tube of toothpaste, there's 1/5 of a level teaspoon. 1/5 of a level teaspoon. And that's a lethal dose for like an 11-year-old child on down. Mm-hmm. And there's no antidote to fluoride poisoning. That's why they're so worried about this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's a highly toxic substance. It's just being presented as if it isn't. But it's in the same class of poisons as cyanide.
Yeah, it's one of the most, from my research, one of the most toxic compounds you can possibly get on the planet.
I've been doing a bit of research into aspartame, and that's pretty up there with them as well.
Oh, it is. Yeah, aspartame. We could start a whole new program on aspartame.
We will do. Actually, somebody in the chat box has gone. Apparently, try stevia. It's low in sugar. Hang on a minute. Try stevia.
Oh, stevia.
Yeah, has that not got? Is that not aspartame? Is that derived from aspartame? No.
No, there's also xylitol.
Oh,
but okay, getting back to fluoride now. The big push now is because there is so much information out there. People are getting access through organizations that you head up, through just everything. Everybody's talking about this. It's very difficult for them to bullshit their way out of selling this without any analytical fact, because that's the problem with it's good for you. It's proven. Where's the documentation? Where are the massive field tests that say that this is actually beneficial? And it just doesn't materialize. So they have an uphill struggle with proving that they can get away with dumping this garbage into our water supply. Where do we go now that they're moving from being in the shadows and just adding it to it without anybody questioning it?
And now
people are questioning it. Now they can't do that. They have to. There's a full frontal assault on just saying, they're giving it into smaller and smaller hands. The local councils now can decide. That's not because the local councils are better equipped. It's because they hope that they can lobby a small local council and nobody actually looks into how bloody toxic it is. We need to mobilize the listeners. We need to get our communities going into, we're not talking about people following what we say. We're talking about people actually looking for themselves and saying, right, let's have a look at this. Is there a reasonable risk through all these studies that there is harm? And if there is harm, which of course we know there is, we should not be dumping this into our water supply. What can people start doing right now to get proactive and actually, writing letters, getting the information out there? What are the web addresses that we can send people to that are listening now so that they can branch out to their networks and start getting some action going? Because I think it is entirely an argument of perception. That the perception is that fluoride is a magical fairy dust that has no negative side effects. And we've got to basically go in there and say, look, at the very least, it's linked to this many studies, and just start getting people to actually have that sort of input.
I would take people to the fluoridealert.org. Right. Fluoridealert.org. It's a website done by a chemist in America. That's from St. Lawrence University. Now, that's a good starting point because it has the history, it has what's happening around the world in different places, and it also has the toxicity, it has studies, it has everything. So you can put in, say you want to specifically name off studies on the thyroid because it disrupts the thyroid. Then you just put that into the website and it'll come up with 20, 30 studies for you. So you can download those and then hand them in. And I think you really have to start networking. That's what we've done here in Northern Ireland. That's what they did in the Isle of Man. They stopped this about 2 years ago in the Isle of Man before it got going. It took about 4 years to stop them, but they stopped them. And they did the same thing. They started networking through unions, through teachers' associations, through churches. Any organization who will listen to you, take this issue to them and ask them to stand up for you. because there's no way that there's no science backing this up. The largest study that was ever done in history was done in America with 36,000 school kids' dental records across fluoridated and non-fluoridated areas. And they found absolutely no difference at all between them. And this was an American government study, which they then quickly buried. So there is no benefit to fluoride at all. It's just an illusion that they put out there just to get rid of the toxic waste. And if you get that book, Chris Bryson's book, The Fluoride Deception, you'll see there's just no science behind it. And there's been a lot of cover-ups. And any doctor who talks out against it, they're instantly dismissed and attacked. So he names case histories as well.
I was told not to go back to my dentist if I continued using non-fluoride toothpaste for myself and the kids. She told me not to go back there.
Well, if she's advocating fluoride, you shouldn't be going to her anyway. Because
no, I went immediately. I haven't gone back there.
And our listener Isabel was talking about the fact that in the States they have fluoride treatments where they basically just flush your mouth full of fluoride, I guess, concentrated fluoride.
They've lost a number of children over that. Children have actually died in the dental chair. Right. I have death certificates for a number of kids in America who've actually been asked to do the mouth rinsing, and they tell you don't swallow it. But kids are kids, and they think it's like chewing gum to them, and they swallow it.
Well, it's like I can remember as a kid. This was without any of the obvious programming. You brush your teeth and you swallow some of it because you think, oh well, it's going to be good for me, because it's killing the. Yeah. That's what kids think.
Of course,
because it's what they're sold to.
Well, who would think that their parents is going to put something in their mouth? It's that poisonous.
And the parents don't think so. We really need to. We can't rely on organisations to look out for our best interests because obviously it's not working. We really need to start getting this together and getting the communities going. So you're saying Fluoride Alert .org is the one to go to. I was there the other day. I was doing some research on thyroids, and the amount of damage that it does to the thyroid is ridiculous. It also depletes the body of iodine, and iodine is massively deficient.
That's where we need Clive to call.
So we've got people going around in general with a massive iodine deficiency, and then they're drinking fluoridated water, and it's stripping, even more. It's a compacted madness that's going on that's just hitting us on so many fronts.
So Walter, we're practically out of time now. Is there any website that people can contact you around, or if they want to get involved in what you're doing and any of your research?
Well, no, I haven't actually done a website. I just keep putting out fluoridealert.org, and that's a good resource. That's as much as I can do. For me, they can find me on the web all right. I'm on YouTube and all over the place because I've been fighting this for a lot of years. And you end up being nailed for this, and getting people putting stuff up online, which is what started to happen. I did an interview once for Red Ice in Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
And they put that thing out all over the world. People were writing to me from different places in the world saying, I saw your piece on Red Ice, and heaven knows, I didn't even know who they were. Mm-hmm. But there you go. So there's a lot of stuff up on the Internet. It doesn't have to be me. You can find plenty of people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of research that's been done. And I would download the most hard-hitting stuff, and I would hand it in to your councils, because you know what they're relying on? They're relying on the fact that there's, say, thousands of councils across England. We don't have thousands of groups who can appear on the same night as them. That's what they're relying on.
Yeah.
So we have to get as many listeners actively involved as we can, because we need the numbers. We need people to go and confront at these council levels. It's the first line of attack. Mm-hmm. It needs to happen because there's too many councils. There's only one group or two groups in England who are fighting this, and they don't have that many people who can even speak at council level. So you're really in trouble here. Mm-hmm. And so I think get a package together. Start, in groups, forming groups, citizens groups, and then take it to your local council. Then take it to your church. Take it to your whoever you can get to listen to you, your union or whoever you're involved with. Get them involved, whether it's the Boy Scouts, I wouldn't care. Anybody. We actually went to mother toddlers groups and started giving talks. Then I went to an old people's home and I gave them a talk. And then I went to a goat farmers meeting and I gave them a talk. I didn't care. I started spreading this out as fast as I could and then trying to get them all to join together.
Well, I think what we're going to do, Walter, is like I said, there's a lot of people coming to me, and what we're going to do is we're going to start drafting out a template letter that we can. We're going to give it out to absolutely any website, whether it's UK Column, Liberty Tactics, Florida
21st Century Wire,
21st Century Wire, and just try and get people just to start sending these letters out and getting it out there that there is a danger to this. It isn't a miracle fairy dust. There are negative side effects, and that's what we're going to have to do because time is running out, and it's a lot more difficult to get that stuff out of your water than them just not putting it in there in the first place.
Well, I'll tell you how hard it is to get it out. In the Republic of Ireland, I started citizens groups back in 1999. Mm-hmm. They're still fighting.
Yeah.
They're still fighting today. That's how difficult this is to get this stopped.
Because there's an awful lot of money in it. We're out of time, friend, but we'll have you back on soon. It's been incredible as always.
And thanks so much for joining us today, Walter.
I think this is one of the most vital aspects because this is the sort of thing that is hitting everyone. Anyways, we'll be back next week with Liberty Tactics, and Danny's going to be on.
And we'll get Patrick Henningson on as well.
And we'll speak to you soon. Get active, and you can get to us at libertytactics.com. Thanks again, Walter, and keep up the fight.
And UK Columns back on Monday, everyone, 1 o'clock normal time.
Stay frosty. Here is the information, because I'm sure a lot of councillors have absolutely no idea. They'll get a little how fluoride is great pamphlet through, and maybe be bought some dinner and some backhanders, and then they'll just vote this through. So I thought the best way would be a nice formal letter that gives them the studies showing that the science behind it is at very least questionable. The health effects. Maybe some titles of lawsuits, because I know in the States they've been losing lawsuits hand over fist. There's quite a few places that they've had to withdraw fluoride because they couldn't prove that it was harmless. Yeah. So I thought it would be a great way of saying, look, I know you're going to vote for this, but here's the information. Now you are on record of being aware of the dangers. And if this goes through, we're gonna move forward with some sort of criminal prosecution, because I'm sort of sick of getting poisoned and there being no accountability. Like, oh well, it's the council, as if the council is some sort of cloud in the sky and there's not actually anybody accountable for it. There are people accountable for it. If somebody put cyanide in your drink, that isn't not poison because they're a diplomat or a councillor or anything. And we need to start actually getting these people to be aware that those choices that they vote on...
They put that in law, but then laws are just a bunch of words written by some guys who, don't have any responsibility to this.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, Walter, because quite a few of the groups are contacting me with, like, James, we need to set up a petition. We need to do petitions to stop this. And from the way I look at it, petitions aren't really particularly the most useful thing. So I was thinking, would a letter of intent be something that we could get people to start mailing into the local councils that basically say, look, if you can link all of the studies, a load of studies together, say, look, if you decide to vote on this, we will hold you legally responsible for the damages it causes personally, because usually these people there's no sort of liability towards anything that happens, you know. But they've actually just passed that preemptively, I guess, to make sure that they weren't liable to poisoning people.
Yeah, but I still think it's worth sending in a letter. A petition, I don't think will have any effect personally. We did a petition here in Northern Ireland. I think we got 14,000 signatures in a couple of months. They just threw it in the bin.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. So I was thinking of a letter campaign, and I would like some help on this from our listeners as well. We've got a lot of really smarter people than I am. I wrote up a sort of draft outline, and it basically was a letter that would give a notice of intent that have consequences.
Yeah.
So you think that sort of thing is still something that is worthwhile to pursue?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's as cut and dried as they think it is, you know, getting away with this. I'll tell you, for a start, it's happening all over the world. In the past 10 years, 250 cities across America have taken this out. In Canada, Calgary took it out about 6 months ago, and I think it's called Windsor, another large city in Canada, in Ontario. They just took it out. They've all stopped after 30 years of doing this. They've been confronted with the science, and it's getting clearer all the time. Queensland in Australia, they just took it out last month. They stopped. They voted to ban fluoride from their drinking water. That's after a bunch of their councillors were made aware of the side effects, and some of them must have done their homework. So I think it's worth sending in the letter, especially talking about side effects, because you may educate these guys.
Yeah.
A lot of them would be actually well-intentioned. There's probably some of them that have been paid off. I wouldn't be surprised, but there's certainly a lot of them are well-intentioned. They don't have a clue how stupid this is.
Well, yeah, that's why I would imagine that they get some sort of glossy flyer that shows people smiling, and then that is the extent of the information that they are given. And then it's like, well, there's people smiling on this thing, you know, and I had a nice dinner. I'm going to vote for this. And, and they still... Hello, welcome back to Liberty Tactics on the TNS Radio Network, and we're joined with Walter Graham.
Hi, Walter. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, you guys?
Yeah, we're
Not
good.
bad. Good to speak to you again.
We haven't spoken in a while.
I know. Got to catch.
Sorry.
It's all kicking off on the fluoride, as we predicted. I think last time that they were going to start more and more as more and more information gets out there about fluoride, that they were going to be a lot more ham-fisted in pushing it on us.
Yeah,
and,
it's certainly happening.
We've seen recently that they're giving the local councils the power to poison the
it's the councils now over here.
Yeah, but they've also passed 2 laws in England. One of them absolves whoever puts it in, the water company who puts it in, from lawsuits.
Right.
That's the first thing they've done. The other thing they've done is, if they order the water service to fluoridate, they have no choice. It's mandatory.
I'd like to paint that whole thing that if you question fluoride, it's Dr. Strangelove, the nutter in the military compound that's questioning fluoride, and then that's it. And it's really not that way, is it?
No, because, I mean, really what they're talking about here is cavities is a dietary problem. Mm-hmm. How does throwing in hundreds of millions of gallons of a toxic corrosive acid into all our drinking water every day going to cure a dietary problem? Of course it isn't. Mm-hmm. You know, the whole thing's crazy. If you're going to change the diet of the children, you should be doing it through education. Certainly not through dumping chemicals in the water system like this. And this is a one-size-fits-all. So little babies who actually by body weight drink 8 times more water than the adult in the house are going to get 8 times more of this chemical than an adult. So there's nothing about this that makes any sense. They're just doing this, and the counselors aren't being made aware. Just as you say, they're given a brochure that has a lot of stuff on it that isn't really true, or is half-truths, because I've seen some of their brochures. Like, they'll tell you that there's 250 million people worldwide who are drinking fluoride in like 50 countries, right? Well, if you take away, which I've done, we did the arithmetic on this, we took away Canada, America, New Zealand, Australia, that we were left with just like 1 million, and we still had 48 countries. The whole thing is just it's a house of cards.